All right, get your coffee ready or your tea in my case, maybe your beer or wine if it's evening, but maybe not in the morning, because we're going to analyze now Uber, the pitch deck the first pitch deck that got them the initial investment. And let's use like a time capsule right now to get back to the time back in 2008. You see it here already on the first slide. This is how iPhones looked like, and this is how smartphones at the time looked like. The BlackBerry, who died out later, it's a species that died out, but what didn't die out is obviously Uber. So let's just remember that they had a lot to cover in terms of this new technology, because people were used to cabs. This was really a revolutionary idea. And so it's slightly different from ideas that are already present. They have to dig a little bit deeper and really show the benefits of that. Now, nevertheless, look how they start here. They are starting with the big picture. Cabs in 2008. They're basically explaining why it's really bad for the consumer to use a cab in 2008, that it's slow, unfriendly, that there's a lot of downtime. What else do we have here? There's no two-way communication, that the cars are not the best cars usually. They don't really say here that it's not the best friendliness usually. Nevertheless, we know that was the case, that is the case, and we also know they hinted at that in their presentation. And really it just shows that there's a lot of dead time as a result of this old technology. That's how they frame this here. They frame this big picture here as old versus, hey, why is that old industry the way it is? And that's where they will come in with the opportunity. Let's look into the next slide. They expand here a little bit on the current system. So taxi monopolies that reduce the quality of service. That's again where they hint at how bad the service really is, right? That there are those monopolies, there's no incentive and no accountability for the drivers and the clients. And they really frame that as the main problem. And they say digital hail can make street hail unnecessary. All right, so what happens here is they plant a seed. They haven't really said anything about it yet, but they're planting a seed in their prospect's mind without explaining. There's a bit of intrigue, like how can it make that unnecessary? Because every investor knows if something becomes unnecessary, an old industry, it completely shifts. It's a revolution. And in this case, that revolution really played out. Now, let's look in the next slide where instead of so they planted this seed, and now they say, hey, this is the Uber cab concept, kind of really down to earth. It's fast and efficient, on demand car service. They define the market, which is professional America. They speak about the convenience of a cab in New York City and the experience of a professional chauffeur, but in San Francisco and New York City, right? Because they only originally started out in San Francisco, that's why. But they did focus on Manhattan, New York, very early on as well. And then they come with the technology where they say, look, apart from these kind of social factors, the technology is really key here. And they say the latest consumer web and device technology is what they're using. And they optimize fleets and drivers. We're going to see in just a second what they mean with that. And where they go basically deeper in explaining that. So again, they kind of start high level before they really explain it in detail. You're gonna see that in a second. So one-click car service, right? So in 2008, companies like Amazon already had one-click policies where you could buy with one click. One click was a big thing, but not for car services. Didn't exist. Didn't exist. And so here they say, look, you gotta be a member to use the service. This is where they really explain the service. It's not hailed from the street. So no matter your own licenses are required. Oh, really? Like now, again, they're intriguing. I said, how's that gonna work? And they almost bring us down a funnel where each time they explain a little bit more instead of just putting it all out, which might be too much. They're intriguing us here. You see how they're creating a funnel basically a knowledge funnel where they bring us down. And guaranteed pickup is another one where they say, unlike Yellow Cab, actually you have a guaranteed pickup because the mobile app will match the client with the driver, and they see photos of each other because why do they do that? When you see mobile app will match client with driver, right away the first concern everybody would have is, yeah, but what about security? Can I trust them? And then, see photos of each other, at least it gives not the full explanation, but at least it helps to build some sort of trust. Because obviously companies like Airbnb or any company, any platform that shares something like Airbnb or Uber, there's always the concern, but would consumers really do that? Is it safe, etc.? So they are taking away all the objections right away. They don't wait with them till the end. They actually plant them in here to show, yes, we actually thought about that. Now they go into their value proposition, the key differentiators, where they basically say, look, we have luxury automobiles, which back in the days was the start, but later on, obviously, Uber doesn't have. If you took a Uber before, you probably know it doesn't only have luxury, because that's not really key to their brand, right? They kind of developed away from the luxury segment into something else. But initially they started as a luxury segment because they kind of wanted to tailor it to the busy CEO type or the busy businessman type. And so that's why they say we have great drivers. They basically market them at a premium and say, look, we have better cars, fast response time, it's easy, members only, it's a high-tech solution. And here it comes. Optimized fleet. I mentioned before that they're planting a seed. They do that again, an optimized fleet. Logistical LBS software. They don't explain it in detail what it is, but they will do it again. And that's again how they bring us down in this knowledge funnel. Operating principles. Again, they had to explain a lot here. We're not going to go into every point here. But it's a cashless billing system, it's prepaid, so that's where they basically explain what we know. Like for us, it's obvious, right? That how Uber works, that you have your credit card saved or your PayPal saved, and then it goes automatic. All right, so then here they make it a little bit more real by showing, look, everybody has a smartphone. This is as easy as it gets, and you just send an SMS, pick up at 5 in 5 minutes. And that's how originally it worked with SMS. Remember, it's 2008. I mean, I've not even been on Facebook by then, and later I stopped being on Facebook altogether. But you know what I mean? Oh, actually, no, that's not true. 2006 is when I joined Facebook. That's how old I am. But that's how, obviously, there were still technological hindrances, but they were the first movers, right? It has an advantage, obviously, if you see the opportunities that technology will deliver, even if it was still a bit difficult at that time. Now, Ubercab.com, their initial website, shows the Google Maps integration. So they already show some powerful technology here, that you can book trips, show the fleet status, have a trip history, basically those simple functions we call them today that back then were probably revolutionary. And now they answer the question, what kind of use cases do we have? So of course they focus a lot here on the system, right? Which is slightly different if you have a system that is already existing. So if you're now Lyft, few years later and you're a competitor of Uber, then you would position that differently, right? But in this case, they really had to lay the grounds to, hey, this is a completely new strategy, a completely new service with a new technology. So we have to explain that a bit more. And the use case here that they pointed out to the investors was, look, airport pickups, local transport where there's parking is difficult, kind of congested downtown San Francisco and New York areas, right? And then obviously restaurants, bar. I mean, they had to point out the obvious. That is what taxis also do, but they had to kind of niche it down, which is always good with investors. You niche it down because if you're everything to everybody, then investors usually don't like that. Investors usually see through that and say, well, the chances that you can be everything. If Uber went out, and obviously Uber is everything to everyone, but went out and just said, look, we're going to revolutionize this. We don't need any niches. We're just completely taking over and making taxis obsolete. And by the way, they're gonna say something similar to that, but not quite. You will see in a second. But if they just did that and said, this is us, and we are everything to everybody, what's the use case? We're just replacing taxis. They're like, yeah, sure, right? An industry that has been there for, I don't know, 100 years. You're just gonna replace it with a little smartphone. That would maybe not have worked, right? And instead, they niche it down here. They're speaking about concrete use cases and concrete user benefits. And that's where now the powerful, let's say, why question gets answered. The why would a user want to do that? Because people are used to taxi, right? There's inertia. The principle of inertia means people won't change. That's an objection that investors would have. And I need you to think of your own product or service and do the same. Think of what kind of objections will people have? And the natural one is, well, what's the benefit? Why would anybody do that? Why questions are always great to answer in terms of objections. Now here they say, cabs don't guarantee the pickup. They can take 45 minutes. Again, they kind of hint at cabs suck, right? It's difficult, it's complicated. They again go a little bit into how difficult it is for a user to use that, and it's an old system, a monopoly. Cabs aren't safe or clean as limos. Oh, by the way, that's why they kind of answered the objection who would want that in terms of security by saying, yeah, we are actually safer than cabs and cleaner because we have this limo service, kind of luxury. So you see what I mean? They basically are using, they changed their business model slightly to answer to an objection, which later they didn't have to anymore. I mean, it wasn't obviously only limos anymore. Speaking a lot here, but there's really a lot of interesting stuff here. Car services require 1 to 3 hours notice. Oh, yeah. I mean, all of those, they basically pointed out again, what's the status quo and what's the problem with that? Right? So they kind of switch here back and forth between this is us, and they remind them of the problems, and they remind the problems by speaking of their user benefits. Car services transfers average over $60 and tax, and Uber would be faster and cheaper than a limo, but nicer and safer than a taxi cab. So that is kind of, again, a niching, right? They say, well, we're fast and cheaper than this, but nicer and safer than that. Very good example here, how they talk about the benefits. And notice they don't speak about the benefits in terms, they don't speak about features, right? There's always a difference between features and benefits. They don't say, we have this great app, and with this app, it's possible to order or do this and that. No, they really focus only on the benefits, which is usually hard to do for anybody who has their own company. And for them, it's clear, well, obviously that's a benefit, but this is we're focusing so much on the features because that's where we are putting all our time to, right? Uber probably put all their time in terms of programming the technology, but they don't speak that much about technology. It's like the technology is kind of, we have that, and that's an advantage that we have that guarantees a benefit for the customer. Makes any sense that I speak? I hope I'm not speaking too fast here. Maybe I'm talking too slow, actually. So let's go on to environmental benefits. Oh, interesting, right? So in order to convince somebody in 2008 of such a new service, they focus on not just the consumer benefit, but something additional, something that goes with the trend of environmental benefit. And in this case, they say here that 35% of the time is spent looking for fares, that they have hybrid vehicles, which are 2 times more efficient than a cab, and ride sharing and carpooling incentives, which was a topic back then, which is a topic now, right? So the environmental aspect is kind of an advantage to them. They wanna, again, point it out. Why? Well, to show the investors, not just that they're environmental, maybe the investor likes that, maybe not, but to show the investor that they go with this trend and they have a solution to a problem, which is obviously pollution and the environmental side effects. Now, they speak a little bit about their cab fleet. Again, we're not going to spend so much time on this because that was back in the days, and we all know that the Uber of today looks slightly different than that. Initial service area, that's quite interesting. What is this here? Central SF. SF, obviously, if you pitch something in the Bay Area, then you don't have to write San Francisco. You make a shortcut to SF San Francisco. Why? Because it's a bit like an inside joke and people like this. Like Manhattan soon after. Obviously, they know what is meant, and it shows again a bit of a niching. It shows, look, this is where we're starting. I can only assume now on this slide explain the reasons why they choose that, which is most likely gonna be congested downtown city, a high adoption of smartphones, right? So the technology is actually in the consumer hands. Consumers care about environmental benefit. They care about all those other things, and this is really where the benefit play out the best in those congested SF and Manhattan areas. Oops. So they are now going a bit deeper into the demand forecasting, where they say cars who was in statistically optimized positions. I mentioned that earlier, remember? When I said they kind of laying the seed and they explain about technology. But here really, they're speaking now about the statistically optimized position, right? So here they say, oh, not only do we replace caps, we make it better. Why? Because we are in the statistically optimized position and we have the technology on the back to do that. Let me see if I can quickly find where they say here, digital hail can make street hail unnecessary. Here they hint a bit at it, because if they are better in terms of they are in better positions, well, then that is a strong competition. And there were maybe a couple of other times here that they talked about it. High-tech solution, geo-aware auto dispatch, and optimized fleet. This is again this knowledge funnel that I spoke about, right? Where they give us a little bit of information, not everything at once. That's what you gotta do, especially when you have a new product or category of products actually that is not in the market as such. Let's go back to our slides here, where now finally they go a bit into numbers, very important. And so first they speak about the overall market. They speak about a 4.2 billion annual market. I mean, so far so good, but at least they show some numbers about the actual players. Here's something interesting. They show that the top 4 players combined have only 22% of revenues, which basically shows that yes, there are those monopolies that they spoke about, but those are not like countrywide monopolies. And so why do they do that? They basically show that, look, if with our technology, again, they hint on that, we could potentially, because we could offer it nationwide, we could actually move those competitors away more easily than if we are actually fighting against very established companies in that space. And then they speak about the composition of the market. Again, why do they do that? They want to ensure or plant a seed in the investor's mind that they are potentially on to something here, and we know that they were, right? So focus on urban service on demand. And this is the 2007 market. So again, they speak a bit where is the non-airport trips is the biggest part here, 64%. And apologies for the bad quality. That's unfortunately as good as I got those slides, but I think it's good to have them at all. And then airport trips on retailer, 12%, and then business airport trips, 9%. So they kind of to give a little bit the structure of the composition of the market. And then potential outcomes is a very interesting slide here. Why? Look at this. Best case scenario. Becomes market leader, 1 billion plus in yearly revenue. They basically show, look, with this technology, we could become the market leader. However, this is our best case scenario. And if you look at it, are they having 1 billion in yearly revenue? No, they have much more. They have way more, right? So it's even conservative. You see what that means? It's dangerous to not be conservative and say, oh, we could be the world leader in this and we're going to make 200 billion, or I don't know what's the current revenue, but much more than 1 billion. That's dangerous. And instead, they are really conservative. And they say, look, realistic success is we get 5% of the top US cities, the top 5 US cities, that generate some 20 to 30 million per year profit. And that's that. How does that sound if you really believe that you're onto something and you could be the market leader? But nevertheless, you say, oh, maybe we make 20 to 30 plus in yearly profit. And that's the realistic success scenario. It's hard. If you're a founder, it's hard, but you gotta do it, because otherwise the investors won't believe you. And finally, the worst case scenario says, look, worst case, no, we go out of business. Worst case is we remains a 10-car, 100-client service in San Francisco as a time saver for San Francisco-based executives, and that's that, right? So kind of worst case, you're not gonna lose your money, but you just, worst case here is you're not gonna make any money. Genius, you see it? The worst case is not, oh, you lose all your money. No, worst case, this is something that we have some clients and it just remains local. Worst case is you're not gonna make any money, all right? All right, so we're gonna start being a bit faster here, 21, almost done, all right. So smartphones, this is again where they speak now about smartphones and the technology and the increase in the share, and obviously because it was an important part of the business that people have smartphones, right? People without smartphones obviously won't be able to do that. And future optimizations, this is where they talk about where they are and where they want to be. They want to have, of course, more hybrid cars, better GPS technology, so that obviously people find each other, right? A problem that we still face today with Uber, that sometimes the driver comes on the other side, or that the GPS in a certain city doesn't work so well. And so that's obviously where they say, hey, look, we know these are problems and we're going to focus on them. Okay. And so cheaper cars by buying used. Yeah, why not, right? So reducing the costs is something that investors always like to see. And they always like to see we are increasing the margins and reducing the costs, right? We're reducing the costs and getting more customers. That's what the investor really wants to see. And that's also where some of these other points go into. Get here now costs more than tomorrow at 5 p.m. And so because of that, they basically show, look, this is additional kind of revenues where we can change the packages, or we can charge more for, I need a cab right now, then I schedule it for tomorrow. And finally, pay premium for on-demand service and discounted rates for Sunday, Tuesday, multi-hour booking. So again, this is just to show, look, this is our business. We know what we're doing. These are the developing steps. We are not there yet, but we have a clear eye on them. It's a bit like taking away objections. And finally, marketing ideas is something that is interesting. Why? Because it's the last slide. Why? There's no thank you slide, there's no what do you think slide, but it's marketing ideas. Why do you think? Well, because now the investors get thinking, oh, how could we market that? Right? It's almost like assuming that this is a great idea. How would we market it? And they have already some keywords here, but you see that the slide is still empty. There's still room on the slide down here. And they say things like CAPS 2.0, the NetJet of Limos, possible slogan, the one click. So here they talk about the marketing and ideas, and why. Again, because this starts the process of thinking in the investors how to do something. It takes away the should we do that, right? Should we get invested in that? It presupposes, obviously we should, everybody, right? Obviously there's such a great idea, it should be done. The question is now, how do we market it? Genius. Hope you learned something in this video from Uber. I found really good nuggets here that I think apply to many online businesses these days. I hope you could take something from it. Now let's go on with the next one.